Hey, so if you follow me on Twitter, and if you don't, then honestly, fair enough. I mostly just post dumb memes basically 24/7. You might have seen I posted this the other day, and that made me think. Maybe I should review every book I own in as short a time as possible, because that's definitely the content everyone's subscribed for. So without further ado, here's my review of all the books on my shelf. Haven't read it. Read most of it. It's an interesting insight into why the Clinton presidential campaign was structurally and infrastructurally flawed, perhaps even from the beginning. Read bits and parts of it when I was playing L.A. Noire. I'm not much of a detective, so I ended up cribbing from it a little too hard. Maybe I'm just not good at using subtle visual cues to determine whether the witness is lying. Read it for my degree. Honestly, it's a bit dry and not really my thing. Haven't read it. Read it when I was a kid. I thought it was pretty sad at the time. Picked it up a few years later, and now it's just a bit It's about transplantation of organs from animals to humans, but I'll be real, I don't really know what stance the book takes on the subject. Haven't read it. Read bits of it. Interesting review of the history of parliaments dating back to the 10th century. Read some of the stories in the anthology. It's decent. Very interesting book about the various strategies dictatorships use to keep themselves in power through supposedly democratic elections. Very legal and very cool. Read a bit of it. I don't think it'll work, but read some of it. It's pretty interesting how he views the world, but it's clear he's got a bit of an ego to him. Have read it. It's an interesting breakdown of all the things Trump has done in office since he's taken power. Clear pro-liberal slant, but otherwise a decent documentation. Read it a bit when I was using Unity 3.x, but obviously not very useful now. I literally wrote it, so I think this is the best book in literary history. Haven't read it. Birthday present, thought it was funny. Haven't read it. Have read it. It's a bit dark for a young Bond story, but the ending was gripping as all hell. I've sort of read it. Most of the buildings in here aren't ones I've seen, but they're all pretty cool, and I'm checking off as many as possible. Haven't read it. Have read it. It's an interesting book in so much as it teaches the reader about writing through the lens of Stephen King's experience of life. It's a really neat method. Read it cover to cover in one night. It's an amazing story about a president who's clearly losing his mind, and one senator's attempt to try and restore order. Literally buy it now. It is read a bit of it. I need to get back into website design and stuff because it's been a while and my company webpage leaves a bit to be desired. I haven't read it. Read it during my A-levels. It's a non-fiction book about the American experience in Vietnam by Frederick Logeval, a Harvard professor. It's decent but a bit heavy for me, so whatever. Read bits of it. I really do need to learn it though if I'm ever going to build my dream version of Planet Minecraft. This book is great. It's a full-on textbook for degree-level students on the functioning parts of the American government. Absolutely required reading if you're interested in how the US government works. Read parts of it. I think my favorite bit is when Roosevelt absolutely nays the Democratic National Convention into making him president for a third time. Absolute mad lad. Haven't read it in a while. Want to get back into Raspberry Pi programming, but it's just a question of not having enough time. Read it a bit when I was doing my A-levels. Don't really remember what's in it. Dead joke about how young Stalin looking fine though. Gift from a friend. I've read a lot of it, but it made me sad, so I kind of had to stop for a little while. I need to get back into it though. It's a really cool story. Read the first few chapters. It's an interesting autobiography that kind of goes all the way back to the beginning of Michelle Obama's life. It's a wild ride for real. Read some of it, but I'm not a very good chef, and I ended up poisoning myself more than once, so life. I feel bad that I haven't read this one because it was a birthday present, but I've been meaning to and will just as soon as I finish the Hellfire Club. This is brilliant. The graphic novel art style is fantastic. Terry Pratchett is a genius. It's an absolutely insane story about a wizard and the Discworld's first tourist on a mad jape, and it's fantastic, and pick it up right now. Read bits of it, don't really remember though. Haven't read it. Clearly not written by Trump himself because the language is of someone with a greater than 4th grade linguistic comprehension. Interesting stories about Trump's life as a real estate magnate, though recent New York Times investigations lead me to think maybe he left out all the parts about tax evasion. This book essentially just takes tweets that Trump has made and speeches he's given and interviews he's appeared on and splits them up and turns them into poetry. It's a neat little book if you have half an hour to kill. I haven't read it. Cool book. Basically, the New Yorker got Mark Singer to profile Donald Trump as a Republican candidate while he was still just a long shot for the nomination, but it's an interesting insight into the person that Trump is. Short too, so you can read it in not a lot of time. Read it when I can't think of a word or need a particularly cool word for a sentence. I've been reading it. It's about a sitting congressman and former war vet in the 1950s who ends up in some murky business, which I'm always down for. Plus, it's by Jake Tapper, and the lead is one of my guilty pleasures, so Trump did write this one. It's brilliant. It's so hard to explain, but it features time loops and body swapping and murder mystery elements. It's just haven't read it. Read it for my A-levels or my GCSEs, I can't remember, but it's a good summary of the US experience of the wars between 1917 and 1945. Not really a book I'd buy organically, but certainly good if you're learning about the period. Not sure how much of it is true, but if nothing else, it certainly takes creative license with the truth. Still interesting. If you take it with a massive lump of salt, it's a good summary of the dysfunctionality of the Trump White House. I haven't read it, I swear. Alright, cool guys, make sure to rate, comment, and subscribe.